My name is Sen, and I never imagined that my parents would disown me at my sister Kalista's Harvard graduation. But that's exactly what happened. My parents, Everett and Astria, stood in front of everyone and publicly announced that I was no longer part of their family. No explanation, just a cold declaration, while Kalista, their golden child, was celebrated. I arrived early, not because I was excited, but to see if they had the audacity to make it official. The sun was shining over Harvard Yard, but I felt the weight of the moment, invisible among the proud families. When I spotted my parents, they barely acknowledged me. My mother's eyes skimmed me as if I was just a stranger. "Oh, Sen, you came," she said flatly. "I got the invitation," I replied, trying to remain calm. Kalista, glowing in her robe, opened her arms for a quick hug, but I could feel the awkwardness in her gesture. I glanced at the seating chart, and my name was nowhere to be found. Instead, I was handed a badge that read "Guest" in plain letters. No family crest. It stung, but I clipped it to my blazer and walked toward the seating area. During the ceremony, my father stood up and began his speech. "Today, we celebrate the brilliance of our eldest daughter, Kalista. This day also marks a turning point for our family. That includes our youngest daughter, Sennevermer." The words hit me like a punch. I sat still, not crying, but aware of every part of me. There was no protest, no gasp, just uncomfortable whispers from the audience. Kalista didn't speak up. She just kept her eyes on the floor. Later, at the reception, I searched for my seat at a table marked Caldwell and Guests. Kalista's name was there, but mine wasn't. A familiar face from middle school glanced at me and said, "I thought you weren't coming. Your mom said it was a closed family celebration." The cruelty of it hit me. I was a ghost in their world. The reception was buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses, but I felt the weight of the silence in my chest. I wandered through the crowd, avoiding the pitying looks, the polite smiles, and the awkward glances. Kalista was the star of the show, surrounded by friends and family, basking in the attention my parents had always reserved for her. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray, pretending to join in. But inside, I felt like an imposter. My name was erased from the guest list, from the family. I wasn't even supposed to be here. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I walked toward the back of the reception tent, past the tables filled with gifts and congratulatory cards. That's when I noticed it. A folded ivory card left on a table. I picked it up, knowing exactly what it would say. It read, "Congratulations to our only daughter, Kalista. With all our love, Mom and Dad." Something inside me shifted, but it wasn't rage. It was cold, quiet clarity. The piece I had been missing clicked into place. I wasn't just left out. I was erased. They had taken the time to make sure I didn't exist in their world anymore, and they had done it with the same ease that you would cross off a name on a list. A woman walked past me, her floral dress swishing as she glanced at me with a polite smile. "You must be with the catering team," she said, eyeing my badge. "You're not wearing the family pin." It was all too much. They had taken everything, my seat, my name, my place in the family, and now they were questioning my right to even be at their celebration. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was clear. I left the reception quietly, slipping out the back exit. I didn't rush home. I wandered through the streets, passing families laughing and chatting, their lives untouched by the betrayal I had just experienced. The sun dipped below the skyline, but the emptiness inside me only grew deeper. When I finally returned to my apartment in Somerville, I tossed the graduation program on the kitchen counter. It fluttered open, revealing a photo of Kalista standing with my parents, smiling. The caption read, "Proud moment for the Caldwell family." No mention of me. Not even a hint. That night, I sat on the floor with Kalista's old high school yearbook. The photo of my parents and Kalista on the front porch caught my attention. I remembered that photo. I had stood there too, right next to Kalista. But in this version, I was gone. Cropped out, erased. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. I touched the edge of the page, feeling the bitterness rise in my throat. They didn't forget me. They erased me. And I realized something. This wasn't just about a graduation. It was about years of being invisible, of helping and supporting a family that never truly saw me. I had been their silent provider, but when I needed them most, they made sure I didn't exist. The days after Kalista's graduation passed in a strange, hollow blur. I went to work, did my job, and carried on as though nothing had changed. But everything had. The silence at home, the absence of my name at the family table, it all weighed on me. I started to question how much I had truly mattered to them. The truth was, I had always been the one who carried the weight. Their financial troubles, their emotional needs, their failures. I had always been the one to pick up the pieces. I tried not to dwell on it. I tried to focus on work, on the day-to-day things that needed attention. But the truth gnawed at me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deeply they had betrayed me. They hadn't just erased me from their lives. They had taken something that was mine. Something my father had promised me. I sat down one night, my laptop open in front of me, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark apartment. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew something had been wrong. Something had always been wrong with how they treated me. And that night, I decided to dig deeper. I started with the family foundation. I had been an accountant for the Caldwell Foundation part-time years ago, setting up the digital systems and helping with the books. I never thought I'd need to access it again, but I still had access to the shared drive. They had never revoked it. Typical of them. They erased people with words, not technology. I began scanning through old files, tax documents, donation receipts, and board meeting notes. I was looking for something, anything that would explain why they treated me this way. And then I found it. A folder labeled Holdings Updated. Inside, there was a PDF titled Transfer Authorization Seaside Property Final. My heart stopped. I clicked the file, and there it was. My name, my full legal name, typed above a signature. But it wasn't mine. It was a bad copy, a forgery. The signature looked almost like mine, but the S was flatter, and the loop on the L was too wide. It didn't match my real signature. I stared at it, disbelief washing over me. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was criminal. The document was a transfer authorization for the beach house in Cape Elizabeth, the place I had spent countless summer days, the place my father had promised to leave me in his will. I had helped repaint the porch rails during college, washed the salt from the windows, and spent evenings sitting on the deck, listening to my father grill salmon. This was the house that had always been a part of my family's history. But now it wasn't mine. They had forged my signature to strip me of ownership, to sell it behind my back. I felt sick. The house wasn't just a property. It was the last piece of my connection to my family. They had taken it from me without a second thought. I grabbed my phone and called Aunt Mavis. She was the only person in the family who had ever treated me like I mattered, who had always seen me for who I was, not just as the invisible one. She picked up immediately. "Sen, honey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "I found it," I said, my voice shaking. "The property transfer? It's not my signature. They sold it, without telling me." A long silence followed. Then Aunt Mavis whispered, "Oh, Sen, you saw it, didn't you?" I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I could barely breathe. My whole life had been a lie, built on promises that meant nothing. They erased me. They took everything. And now, I don't even have that house anymore. "I thought maybe it was a mistake," Aunt Mavis said quietly. "But your mother, she—" "I don't want excuses," I snapped, the hurt rising up like a tidal wave. "I don't want to hear about how they didn't mean to do it. I just want to know why they thought I wouldn't find out." Aunt Mavis was silent for a long time. "I'm sorry, Sen. I should have told you." I let out a breath, the weight of everything crashing down. It's too late now. The next few days felt like I was living in a fog. I went to work, answered emails, and did everything I could to keep my mind occupied. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted permanently. They had crossed a line. They thought they could erase me, but I wasn't going to let it slide. I had spent so many years in the background, never asking for anything, always giving. But now, I realized that the more I gave, the less they saw me. It wasn't just about the house or the forgery anymore. It was about the years of neglect, the years of erasure. It was about everything I had done for them and how they had never once appreciated it. I could feel the anger growing inside me, but I wasn't going to lash out impulsively. No, this time, I would take my time. I would be methodical. I would make them pay for what they had done. I sat down at my desk one evening, my laptop open in front of me. I didn't sleep much anymore. My mind was constantly racing. piecing together everything I had uncovered. The forged documents, the silent sales, the way they had stolen my inheritance and erased my name from the family. I could feel the walls closing in around me. But this time, it wasn't just about exposing them. It was about taking control of my own narrative. I began gathering evidence. Everything. The forged signature, the transfer authorization for the beach house, the emails I had saved over the years, the documents from the family foundation. I knew exactly where to start. The attorney. Warren Bell had been with the family for years, handling all the legal matters. I was sure he had been involved in this. But before I made my move, I needed to prepare. I couldn't just walk in and demand answers. No, I would approach this carefully. I spent hours compiling the evidence, cross-referencing everything I had. There were recordings, too. Conversations I had recorded when my mother, Astria, talked about how Kalista was the only one who mattered to the family's image. I had saved those, too, because I knew one day I would need them. The next morning, I put on a suit and headed to Warren's office. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding. I wasn't just going to confront him. I was going to take action. I knew he would try to cover for them, try to smooth things over. But I had a plan, and I wasn't afraid to use it. Warren greeted me with a polite smile, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He knew why I was there. "Sen, what can I do for you?" he asked, motioning for me to sit. "I need you to look at something," I said, placing the envelope I had prepared on the table. It was dark burgundy with gold trim, the kind of envelope that used to be reserved for special occasions. But now it was filled with evidence, the proof of their betrayal. Warren opened the envelope, his fingers trembling as he pulled out the first document. His eyes widened as he scanned the papers. "What is this?" "You know exactly what it is," I said, my voice steady. "This is the property transfer for the beach house. It has my name on it, but the signature isn't mine. It's a forgery." He looked up at me, his face pale. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sen. This isn't." "It's not a mistake," I interrupted. "You knew. You all knew." Warren stayed silent, looking down at the papers in his hands. He didn't say anything for a long time, and when he did, it was barely above a whisper. "Sen, you don't understand. Your mother and father, they were just trying to protect the family." "Protect the family?" I laughed bitterly. "By erasing me from it? By stealing what was mine and pretending I didn't matter? I don't need their protection. I need the truth." He didn't argue. He couldn't. He knew that what had happened was wrong, but he also knew the power my parents held. "I need you to fix this," I said, my voice cold. "I want the transfer reversed, and I want the trust documents reviewed. This isn't about a house anymore. It's about everything they've done. Everything they've taken." Warren hesitated, but then he nodded, his expression defeated. "I'll see what I can do, but you have to understand this is a delicate matter." "I don't care about delicate," I replied. "I care about justice." The days following my meeting with Warren felt like a slow build-up towards something inevitable. I could feel the tension in my chest with every breath I took, each one heavier than the last. I wasn't sure what I expected when I confronted Warren, but I knew that I was closer to something important. He had promised to look into the documents, to help me reverse the transfer, but I wasn't naive enough to think it would be easy. This wasn't just a legal matter. This was about everything they had stolen from me. My place in the family, my inheritance, my very identity. I spent my nights going through the evidence, cross-referencing legal documents, and checking every email and voicemail I had saved over the years. I had been meticulous in keeping track of their betrayals, and now it was time to use it all. I wasn't just going to sit back and wait for them to apologize. No. This time, I was going to make sure they faced the consequences of their actions. But the hardest part wasn't the legal battle ahead of me. It was facing the reality that, after everything, they would never see me the way I deserved to be seen. My parents, Kalista, they would always prioritize each other, always put on a facade of a perfect family. But deep down, I knew the truth. They had erased me from their lives, and no matter what happened now, that truth couldn't be undone. On the 5th day after my meeting with Warren, I received a call. It was late in the evening, and I had been preparing documents for the upcoming court hearing. The name on my phone made my heart drop into my stomach. It was Aunt Mavis. Sen, she said, her voice shaky, I think you need to know. Your mother knows. She knows you found the documents. She's furious. She's been calling every lawyer in town, trying to figure out what you're doing. I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. What do you mean? What's she planning? I don't know exactly, Aunt Mavis continued, her voice low, but she's not going to let this go. If you're planning to take them to court, be prepared. She won't back down without a fight. I could feel the weight of her words hanging over me. I had always known my mother was capable of anything to protect her image, but hearing it from Aunt Mavis made the reality sink in deeper. They weren't just going to give up quietly. They would fight me tooth and nail to make sure I stayed invisible, stayed out of their carefully crafted world. But I wasn't going to back down either. I had already lost so much. I wasn't about to lose the chance to take control of my own story. Thank you, Aunt Mavis, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. I'll handle it. Don't worry about me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying the conversation with Aunt Mavis in my mind. My mother's rage, my father's silence, Kalista's indifference. It was all too familiar. They had always expected me to fade into the background, to be the quiet one who would just accept their treatment. But that was no longer who I was. I had seen too much, uncovered too much to let them get away with it. The next morning, I woke up with a new resolve. I wasn't going to be passive anymore. I had already started gathering everything I needed for the legal fight. The forged signature, the emails, the recordings. I had enough to bring them down. But it wasn't just about the beach house anymore. It was about taking back what was mine. It was about reclaiming my identity, my place in the world. I reached out to my lawyer and scheduled a meeting. I told him to prepare everything for the petition I had been working on, a legal challenge that would expose the truth about the Caldwell family's manipulation. It would take time, but I was ready for the battle. As I sat at the coffee table, reviewing the final documents, I couldn't help but think about how far I had come. It wasn't just the house. It wasn't just the money or the property. It was the realization that I had been living in the shadows for too long. I had allowed them to erase me, to diminish me, but no more. This was my fight now, and I was going to win. The days were becoming a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and legal consultations. The more I dug into the family's tangled web, the more I uncovered. I felt like an archaeologist brushing off layers of dust to expose the truth beneath, the betrayal, the manipulation, the lies. But there was one thing I couldn't shake: my mother's cold determination to control everything. If she couldn't erase me from her life, she would do everything in her power to make sure I regretted exposing them. My lawyer, Philip, had been invaluable, but even he seemed nervous as we reviewed the case. We had everything: the forged documents, the emails, the recorded conversations, but we were up against a family with money and power. The Caldwell name carried weight, and I knew the fight would be far from easy. Still, I wasn't backing down. I had already lost too much to let them take the last thing that was mine. I had to make them pay for what they'd done, not just legally, but in a way that would shake them to their core. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about them finally seeing me as something more than an invisible bystander in their perfect world. Late one evening, I received an email from my lawyer with a simple subject line: urgent. I opened it immediately. Sen, the message began. I've received some disturbing news. It seems your mother has been making moves to remove you from the will completely. She's been in talks with the estate planners and is trying to have your name erased from any future inheritance documents. This is the final step in their plan to push you out once and for all. I need to speak with you as soon as possible. I sat still, the weight of his words sinking in. They were trying to finish what they had started, completely cutting me out, even legally, from anything that was mine. My inheritance, my family's wealth, everything I had once been promised. I thought of the beach house, the summers I spent there with my father, the long evenings by the ocean, the place where I had always felt most at home. They were about to take it from me, just like they had taken everything else. I immediately called Philip. We need to move faster, I said, my voice sharp. They're trying to erase me again. We need to act before it's too late. I agree, Philip replied, his tone grave. I've already prepared the petition for the hearing. We'll file it as soon as possible, but we need to make sure we have everything, all the proof. If we move forward now, they'll fight back harder than ever. I knew the risks, but I wasn't afraid. This wasn't just about the house. This was about them thinking they could get away with everything. The lies, the manipulation, the theft. They had underestimated me, and now I was going to show them just how wrong they were. The next day, I drove to the courthouse, determined to take the next step. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with the thrill of taking control of my life. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for an apology or an explanation. I was making things happen on my terms. I met with Philip in his office and went over the details of the filing. The petition would challenge the validity of the forged documents, the wrongful transfer of the property, and demand that my name be reinstated on the trust. It was bold, and it would be messy. But I had nothing left to lose. By the time we finished, it was late in the afternoon. Philip handed me a stack of legal documents, each one representing the first step toward getting what was mine. I took them, feeling the weight of each page in my hands. This wasn't just a legal fight. It was the battle for my place in this family, and I wasn't going to let them erase me anymore. That night, I sat in my apartment, looking at the documents before me. I thought about the family I once knew, the family I thought I could count on. And then I thought about the new family I was building, the one I had created for myself. I wasn't going to let my past define me. I was done being the person who cleaned up their mess. It was time for them to clean up theirs. I filed the petition the next morning. Filing the petition was just the beginning. The moment I submitted the legal documents, everything shifted. The battle had officially started, and I wasn't going to back down. My lawyer, Philip, and I worked tirelessly to prepare for the court hearing. We had the forged signatures, the emails, the recordings, everything I needed to expose my family's lies. But I knew they wouldn't give up without a fight. A few days before the hearing, I received a message from Kalista. We need to talk. I hesitated, but decided to call her. Her voice was soft, regretful. I don't want to lose you, Sen, but you know how Mom and Dad are. I sighed. It's not about them anymore. It's about what's right. I understand, she said, her voice cracking. But it wasn't enough. I knew she was still tangled in the web my parents had woven, and I couldn't rely on her. The day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was tense, but I felt a strange calm. The evidence was clear. My lawyer laid out the forged documents, emails, and recordings. My parents sat there, trying to defend themselves, but they had no words that could cover the truth. When it was my turn to speak, I told my story about how they had erased me, manipulated me, and stolen from me. I didn't hold back. For the first time, I felt seen. The judge listened carefully as my lawyer presented the evidence, and I knew that the truth was on my side. When my mother tried to speak, her words were empty. The evidence spoke louder than anything she could say. I was ready for whatever came next. This time, I was taking control. The aftermath of the hearing was almost surreal. I had stood up in court, laid bare the years of betrayal, and exposed my parents for what they truly were: manipulative, deceitful, and willing to destroy anyone in their path to maintain their image. But as I walked out of that courtroom, there was no sense of triumph, only relief, the kind that comes when you finally lay down a weight you've been carrying for far too long. Days passed, and I waited for the fallout. I knew they wouldn't give up without a fight, and sure enough, the messages started coming in. My mother's voice was full of thinly veiled anger and desperation, trying to convince me that I had misunderstood everything, that I was destroying the family for nothing. But I didn't answer. Kalista's message was different. Sen, I know you're hurting, but I hope one day you'll forgive me. I never meant for any of this. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Her apology wasn't enough. Not after everything. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't about letting others off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the pain they had caused, and I wasn't going to carry that burden anymore. 2 weeks later, I got the news that changed everything. The court ruled in my favor. The transfer of the beach house was declared null and void, and the trust would be audited for any further discrepancies. The property was officially returned to me, and my parents were required to pay for the legal fees incurred during the battle. But the real victory wasn't in the property or the money. It was in the realization that I had finally taken control of my own life. No longer would I be the silent one, the invisible fixer. No longer would I sacrifice myself for a family that had never truly seen me. I decided not to sell the beach house. Instead, I poured everything into restoring it, not for them, but for me. It became a retreat, a place where I could breathe and heal, a place that was mine and mine alone. I turned it into a sanctuary, a quiet space for reflection and growth. It was everything I had ever wanted, but it was mine on my terms. 6 months later, the story was no longer just about the family I had left behind. It was about the future I had created for myself. I hadn't forgiven them, but I had learned something even more valuable, that my worth was not tied to their approval. I had my own life now, a life I was building for myself, with or without them. And then on a quiet evening, I received an envelope. No return address, just my name in familiar handwriting. It was from Kalista. Inside was a short note. "You were right. I'm sorry it took this to see it." I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the need to respond. I placed the letter in a box under my bed alongside the old graduation pin I had once thought would make me feel like part of something. Neither held the weight they once did, but I kept them, not as reminders of what I had lost, but as markers of what I had learned. I no longer needed to be a part of their world. I had created my own.